Welcome to the Fortis Fortress Podcast. I'm your host, Owen Fortis, and in each episode we will go over how to fortify your mind, fortify your body, fortify your spirit. This will help you build a firm foundation for your life. So, join me in fortifying your life, starting now. This is the Fortis Fortress Podcast. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fortis Fortress Podcast. I'm your host, Owen Fortis, and I'm super excited to be here with you guys today. This episode is going to be a good one. It's going to be one that I believe can challenge, convict, encourage, and inspire us all. Okay, today we are diving into the parable of the talents. And if you haven't read the parable of the talents before or know what I'm talking about, it's okay. We'll get into it. I'm going to explain it, but it's a very good parable that Jesus taught during his ministry, and it's an exciting one, and we're going to break it down and find out what it's meaning to all of us. All right. So whether you're tuning in during your coffee, your workout, or you're driving, stick around because we're going to break this down kind of piece by piece. And trust me, you're going to want to hear what this is all about. Okay. So let us get into it. Before we dive in, I kind of want to set the stage, right? So like I said, this parable is part of a larger discourse in Matthew. It's where Jesus is teaching actually about his second coming and the kingdom of heaven. So to give you some context, this is what he's talking about. He's urging his followers to stay ready, stay faithful, and live with purpose because we don't know when he'll return. And in the parable of the the talents, or the three servants, Jesus describes a wealthy man going on a journey, and before leaving, he entrusts his property to three servants. To one, he gives 5 talents. To another, he gives 2 talents, and to a third, 1 talent. And for those of you who don't know what a talent is, I didn't know this either. I had to look it up. But in this context, it's a massive sum of money. It's actually roughly a 20 years worth of wages for a laborer. So even the servant with 1 talent is given a very incredible responsibility that's really valuable. And the master leaves, and each servant decides how to handle what they've been given. So I want to actually read the whole parable itself, just to give you some context. There's the NLT version. It's called the parable of the three servants. And then in the Noab version, it's called the parable of the talents. I'm just going to read from not the Noab, the NASB, New American Standard Bible. I'm going to read from the New American Standard Bible because it's a little, actually like it more, and it's the legit what was actually what was said. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Jesus is talking here. So, in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14. For it is just like a man about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, each according to his own ability. And he went on this journey. The one who had received the 5 talents immediately went and did business with them, and earned 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had received 2 talents earned 2 more. But he who received the 1 talent went away and dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The one who had received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more talents, saying, Master, you've entrusted 5 talents to me. See, I have earned 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, you good and faithful servant. You were faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Also, the one who received the 2 talents came up and said, Master, you've entrusted me 2 talents to me. See, I have earned 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter the joy of your master. Now the one who received the 1 talent also came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. And I was afraid, so I went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, you still have what is yours. But the master answered and said to him, You wicked, worthless, lazy slave. Did you not reap? Did you know that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter seed, then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Therefore, take the talent away from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has more, for to everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does not have shall be taken away. And throw the worthless slave into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Wow. 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 That parable, I honestly didn't even know this parable was in the Bible for the longest time. I've actually just kind of started hearing about it this past year or so, and when I first heard it, I was, like, kinda blown away, like, I didn't even know Jesus taught about this parable, and for me, I had to seek and kinda understand what was going on, right? And kinda get a closer look at what these servants did or didn't do and what was being said, right? So, when we look at the actions and the inactions of these servants, um, we have to first look at the 2 servants, I think, because these first 2 servants show initiative, they show diligence and faith, and they don't waste any time, they act, and this tells me something super crucial that, you know, faithfulness is active, right? Not passive. These servants understood their master's expectations and were willing to take the risks to multiply what they'd been given. It literally says he took the 5 talents and immediately went to go invest it, do business with it. And the other guy did the same, right? So they knew it. They knew what they had to do. They knew that their master was expecting them to do more, to be more, and they multiplied it, right? And here's an example of my own life right now. When I started this podcast, for example, I had no idea how it would turn out, right? I had thought I didn't have the right equipment. I still don't, honestly. I really don't have the right equipment, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how I was going to say it. I didn't know what others are going to think. All these things, but I knew one thing. I had a passion for encouraging people and ultimately sharing God's word. And it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being faithful with the opportunity God had placed in front of me, right? And so I trusted God and started doing this and spreading it. And so far, I'm just taking it one day at a time and walking and trying to listen to God and tells me and Him telling me what to do and just putting all my trust in Him. That's all I can do for right now. But it's a step towards faith. That's the point, right? Is you have to take that step of faith and be active in it. Um, Now let's talk about that third servant, right? He is fearful, and I guess you can say he was lazy, right? He didn't lose the talent, right? But he didn't use it either. Instead, he buried it and offered excuses when his master returned. He said, "I knew you were a hard man. I knew you didn't um, do any work, right?" So what is he really saying? He's really blaming the master for his own fear and inaction. And how often do we do the same? I know I've done this before, right? Maybe we've been given a gift, a skill, or an opportunity, but we let fear hold us back. We convince ourselves it's better to play it safe than risk failure, right? But here's the hard truth. Playing it safe can be just as dangerous as taking a risk. Let's say that again. Playing it safe can be just as dangerous as taking a risk. You know, and as I think about this too, I try putting myself in God's shoes, right? Although I can never be God, but He gives us gifts. He gives us everything, right? In the Bible, I believe it says God gives us everything. He's responsible for everything that He gives us and everything that He's made, right? It's all ultimately God's, right? And we're His creation made in His image. And if He gave you something and you don't use it, how blasphemous is that to God? Or how, like, I wouldn't, if, say if they were, if, like, I try to put myself in God's shoes, right? And if I gave somebody and they didn't do anything with it, they just sat there, I'd be disappointed too. I'd be like, "Hey, what the heck? Like, why didn't you go do this? Why didn't you do that with that? Why didn't you do this?" So I can kinda see the perspective here and how playing it safe is honestly like doing nothing. It's blasphemous to God and blasphemous to I don't know. To me, I can kinda see it. It's hard for me to explain it in words, but I can kinda see from God's point of view, like, "Hey, I give you these things. You didn't do anything with it. You just sat there and did nothing with it. Like, what are you doing?" You know? It would hurt me and also I'd be disappointed. I'd be furious as well. So I can kinda see that perspective, and that's kinda how we have to look at it, right? God gives you these gifts, these abilities. He puts an opportunity in front of you, don't jump on it. Like, what are you doing? You know? I don't know. Let me know what you think about that, because that's kind of what I was realizing as as I've been reading this, and as I've been kind of meditating on this. This is kind of what's been sticking out to me. It's like, yeah. Moving on though, um, this parable is really packed with some themes that I think are super relevant in our lives today. So let's dig into to three of them. Number one, right? Kind of touched on this is stewardship. So what is stewardship? I had no idea what this meant a couple days ago, but I looked it up. Stewardship is the job of supervising or taking care of something, such as an organization or property, right? So the master's property wasn't the servants to keep, it was theirs to manage, right? Similarly, everything we have, our time, talents, resources, relationships, belongings, all of it belongs to God, right? Stewardship isn't just about money, it's how we use everything God has entrusted to us. Is what I was talking about earlier, right? It's how we use everything God has entrusted to us. So think about this. Are you using your time to grow spiritually? Are you using your talents to serve others? Are you using what God gave you? And to me, I made this connection as I was kind of thinking about this episode. I made this connection. It kind of takes me back to the book of Genesis, where some of God's first commands were to cultivate and have dominion of the earth, right? You got to think we're made in God's image. He told us to cultivate and have dominion of the earth. What does cultivate mean? It means like create, use what you've been given. God gave us the earth and everything inside it. He wants us to create, cultivate it, have dominion of the earth. Go out, do the things, take the action, take advantage of the opportunities that He puts in front of us. Use what He gave you. That's what He wants. You know, I don't know. To me, that's what it's saying here is to use that. Use what we have inside of us. Use that part of God that's inside of us, right? For His will, for His doing. And I believe I'm starting to believe that's kind of what He wants, you know. And I believe that's one of the themes that's in this parable that Jesus spoke. And you got to think about it too. During that time, um, it's this parable was placed when Jesus was talking about His second coming and about the end times. And I think it speaks powerfully to us. Like, what are we doing? Are we sitting around doing nothing, just waiting? Are we actively telling people about God's word, using what He gave us, and you know, doing His will, right? Uh, and stewardship. I think this is one of the big themes that's in this parable. Another theme that I think is in this parable is faith versus fear. Right? The two servants acted in faith, while the third acted in a state of fear. Faith leads to growth, but fear leads to stagnation. Right? Here's a personal challenge. What would you do if you weren't afraid of failing? It's a big question. I What I would do, I start a business. That's what I would do. I would take more risks. I would do this, do that. I would There's so many things I would do. So what would you do if you weren't afraid of failing? And I think this is a huge, huge one too, because in the Bible, I believe it says that do not be afraid 365 times in the Bible. If I'm not mistaken, you can fact check me on that if you want. but I believe it's actually 365 times exactly. It says, "Do not be afraid." Essentially, don't have fear, right? And it's kind of odd that it adds up to 365. So I think that's important. And I think this parable really speaks true to act in faith instead of fear. Don't be like that third servant, right? And now that kind of leads to the third theme, which is accountability. The master returned and held each servant accountable for their actions. This reminds us that one day we'll stand before God and give an account of how we lived our lives. That's scary, right? So for me, I always said that's scary, but for me, this isn't about fear. It's honestly about motivation. I want to hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." Don't you? I feel like that's all what we all should strive for. And get moving, use what we've been given. That is the point, because we're going to be held accountable. We're going to be coming face to face. That to me, right, plays into a good. It's about motivation, but it is also about having the fear of God. I mean, you're going to be held accountable. You're going to be judged by the Lord Himself on what you've done and how you lived your life. And I want to be. I want to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I don't know about you guys, but that's what I want to hear. And we have to use what He's given us and do the will of God in our lives today. So how do so how do we apply this parable into our lives today? Right? We're gonna break it down. Get practical. That's how we do it on this podcast. Get practical and how we break it down and use it to our lives. So first step is to identify your talents. Take time this week, reflect. What has God entrusted to you? Is it a skill, a passion, a relationship, or an opportunity? Whatever it is, write it down, or you don't have to write it down, but know it, right? Figure it out, right? Because God's given us something. We all have something that we're doing, that we know, that we have, and write it down. This I've actually struggled with for a while, was identifying my talents, because I didn't know. But as you go in life, you start realizing what you have a talent for, what you like doing, what you don't like doing, and you get a sense of where you're supposed to go. Right? So identify your talents. That's step one. Step two, take action. Pretty self explanatory, guys. Take the freaking action. Don't bury your talent. Don't be like that third servant who just buried it and blamed the master. Start using it, even if it's in small ways. For example, if you have a gift for encouraging others, start by sending uplifting messages to your friends, or even spreading it on your social media. This is what I started doing. I feel like I'm like encouraging others, and so I like spreading it on social media. If you're good at organizing, volunteer to lead a project, right? If you're good at making something, make things for other people. Use the point is, take the action, use what God gave you, right? And step three, trust God with the results. Right? The first two servants didn't know they succeeded, but they trusted that process. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about being faithful. It's about faithfulness. Trust God. Trust God with what He gave you. So, as we wrap up, let's remember this. The parable of the talents isn't just about money or success. It's about living with purpose, being faithful, and trusting God with what He's giving us. Let me leave you with this question too. What will you do this week to be a faithful steward of what the gifts God has entrusted you? What will you do? Will you sit there, bury it, and hide? Or will you take action, invest, and multiply your talents? If today's episode challenged you or encouraged you, or you got some sort of value out of today, I'd love to hear about it. Send me a message, share this podcast with someone who needs to hear it. And if also you have a different take on this parable, please let me know. We'll discuss it. We could talk about it and maybe talk about it in a future episode because I'm really curious on what you guys think of this parable. Because to me, this is a very big parable, one that has a lot of context, and I don't know, it's very, very interesting, and I find it just awesome. Awesome, scary, cool. But yeah, guys, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like, subscribe, and follow for more episodes. Thank you for tuning in to the Fortis Fortress podcast, guys. Please remember to follow us on Instagram. You subscribe to the YouTube, follow us on TikTok. And yeah, guys, until next time, always remember, fortify your mind, fortify your body, fortify your spirit, and let's keep building that fortress, right? Other than that, I hope you guys have an amazing day. This has been the Fortis Fortress Podcast. Peace.